She had found the town name in a poem, not in a letter, not in a document, not in anything that could be called evidence. In a poem her husband Clarence had memorized as a boy and sometimes recited in the evenings, sitting in the kitchen with his hands around a coffee cup, his eyes not quite focused, as though the words were being read off the inside of something only he could see. He had recited the poem the last time on a Tuesday evening in February, 3 weeks before his death. She had listened the way she always listened, half attending, half occupied with her own thoughts, and she had not known it was the last time. The poem was by a local poet she had never tracked down, something Clarence had learned from his father, and it contained the name of a town in the hill country of central Kentucky, Darden's Mill. She had heard it 20 times over 53 years and paid it no particular attention until the morning after his funeral, when she was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee, and she heard herself thinking, why did Clarence know a poem about Darden's Mill? Vera Okafor was 82. She had a sharp mind and a bad hip and a German shepherd named Finn who had been trained by her late husband for reasons she had not thought to question until after Clarence was gone, which was true of many things about Clarence. Finn was 4 years old, long-bodied, with the deep black of his saddle going to rust gold on his legs and underbelly, and the specific stillness that trained dogs develop, the ability to be completely motionless while remaining completely alert. He was sitting across from her in the kitchen, watching her face. "Darden's Mill," she said. Finn's ears moved forward. She looked up Darden's Mill. It existed, a small community in Breckinridge County, Kentucky, population a few hundred. She looked up the county property records. She found, after 2 hours of searching with the patience that 82 years of practicing patience provides, a single property registered to a trust, the Okafor Westfield Family Trust, established 1989, at an address described as Ice House Structure 1. 2 acres Darden's Mill Road. Okafor was Clarence's name. Westfield was his mother's maiden name. She sat with this for a very long time. Her daughter Pamela had come from Louisville after Clarence's death and had spent 2 weeks at the house helping with what Pamela called the process. The process involved a great deal of sorting and discarding and organizing, and Pamela had a system for all of it. She sorted into 3 categories: keep, donate, discard. She moved through Clarence's study with the brisk efficiency of someone who equates action with healing and has perhaps not considered the alternative. Vera had watched from the doorway. She had not argued, because Pamela's grief expressed itself as movement, and Vera had learned not to impede other people's grief processes. She had saved, quietly, the things she knew were irreplaceable: the notebooks, the Bible with the marginalia, the coffee table book of Kentucky photography Clarence had bought in 1988 and consulted with the regularity of someone using a reference volume. She saved the coffee table book because on the last evening of Pamela's visit, when Pamela had said they should go through the bookshelves, Vera had said she would handle those herself, and Pamela had let her. In the coffee table book she found inserted loosely a photograph, a building, not a house, not quite a barn, a low structure of cut limestone with thick walls and small high windows and what appeared to be a sealed well in the foreground. The building was weathered but intact. On the back of the photograph, in Clarence's handwriting, Ice House Darden's Mill, still standing, 2018. She had been to Darden's Mill in 2018. She remembered the trip. She and Clarence had driven to Louisville for a cousin's celebration and had returned by a different route. She had asked at the time why they were going that way, and he had said he wanted to see the hill country. She had slept for part of the drive. She had not asked more. She put the photograph in her coat pocket. She said nothing to Pamela. After Pamela left, Vera found the trust in the county records as described above. The trust predated Pamela's involvement in any of Clarence's affairs. It could not be touched by any arrangement Pamela had made or was planning to make regarding the estate, and Vera had begun to understand, from small things Pamela said in careful tones, that there were plans: the house, the accounts, the investment portfolio Clarence had built over 40 years of careful management. Pamela was an only child. She expected to be the administrator. Vera called the Breckinridge County property assessor. She called the number listed for the trust administrator, a law office in Elizabethtown. She was connected to a woman named Susan Feld who confirmed everything and said, "He said you'd call when you were ready. He said it might take a while." He was right, Vera said. "I'll be there Friday." She booked a room at the Elizabethtown Inn, packed Finn's things and a small bag of her own, and did not tell Pamela where she was going. She did not tell Pamela because she was not ready to answer questions that required patience she did not currently have. This was not deceit. This was the allocation of resources, which Clarence had taught her. You cannot give equally to everything. You choose what receives your full attention and you give it that. Her full attention was on the ice house. The drive from their home in central Indiana to Elizabethtown was 4 hours through the Ohio River country and then up into the Kentucky hills. Finn was subdued for the first hour and then alert for the rest, sitting in the back seat with his nose to the slightly open window, reading the landscape as it changed from flat to folded. He had never been to Kentucky. She was fairly certain Clarence had brought him here. She knew this because when the hill country began and the road began to climb, Finn put his head up and his ears fully forward and made a single sound, not a bark, not a whine, just a short exhalation with a note to it, and then was silent for the rest of the drive, watching forward. Susan Feld met her at the Elizabethtown office on Friday morning, a practical woman precise who wore no jewelry and spoke without preamble. She confirmed the trust instrument, walked Vera through the registration, explained the annual maintenance stipend that had been drawing automatically from account Clarence had established in 1989. She said the ice house had been maintained by a local firm, the structural condition was sound, and the sealed well on the property was the original building feature intact. The sealed well? Vera said. The ice house was built in the late 1800s, Susan Feld said. It used a natural spring well for cooling. The well was sealed when the county required it in 1971. Your husband asked specifically that it not be disturbed. She paused. He was very specific about that. Vera thought about this. She thought about Finn, trained by Clarence, and Clarence's instruction about the well. She thought about the photograph, the low limestone building, and the sealed well in the foreground. Thank you, she said. Can I go today? Susan Feld gave her the key and the address. Darden's Mill Road was a county road that wound through the limestone hill country in the unhurried way of roads that were never meant for speed. The properties along it were small farms, woodlots, a few houses, and the ice house was at the end of a gravel track that climbed a small rise before leveling into a clearing. The building sat at the north end of the clearing, solid and gray, exactly as in the photograph. The sealed well was in the foreground, a circular limestone curbing perhaps 3 feet in diameter, fitted with a concrete cap that had been set in mortar. The mortar was old, 1971 old, perhaps, but the cap itself was slightly higher than the curbing, as though it had been reset more recently. Finn was out of the car and across the clearing before Vera had fully stood. He went directly to the well. He circled it once, tight, his nose at curbing level, and then sat beside it and looked at her. Vera stood at the car door and looked at the well and then at the ice house. We'll start inside, she said. Finn turned his head and looked at the well. Inside first, she said. He came with her. He was a dog who respected her decisions even when he disagreed. The ice house was a single large room with the high, small windows and thick limestone walls designed to maintain cold. The interior temperature was, even in late March, noticeably cooler than the outside air. The floor was flat stone. The ceiling was timber and plank. On the north wall, shelving that appeared original to the building. On the shelves, equipment from an earlier era, stone crocks, a wooden butter mold, a set of iron tools she could not immediately identify, and in the center of the middle shelf, placed with deliberate centrality, a glass jar, sealed, containing what appeared to be dried lavender. The lavender was deep purple still, barely faded, the kind of fresh-dried lavender that keeps its color for years if kept from moisture and light. She recognized the jar. It was from her kitchen, a ball jar she had used for preserving, one of a dozen. The lid was sealed with the white plastic band she had used in the last decade after she moved away from the old metal bands. This jar had come from their home. Clarence had brought it here. Finn was at the shelving, his nose moving along the shelf edge. He stopped at the jar, inhaled once, and then moved to the end of the shelf and began nosing at the back corner. She came to look. The shelf's back panel was not fixed. It was a removable piece, fitted into grooves. Finn was pressing his nose into the gap at the corner. She pulled the panel out. Behind it, a space cut into the limestone wall, rough, the work of a chisel and patience. Inside, a military tin box, the same olive drab she associated with her brother's service items, and a folded cloth that turned out to be a flag. The Kentucky state flag, small, the kind sold at state fairs and tourist shops, and under the flag a sealed envelope. She took everything to the table. Finn sat across from her. She opened the envelope. Vera, I want to tell you about this building. But first, I need to tell you about my grandmother. Josephine Westfield, my mother's mother, was born in Darden's Mill in 1901. She ran a dairy out of this ice house from 1931 to 1944, during the Depression and the war, when no one had money and everyone needed milk, and she had both. She charged what people could pay, which was sometimes nothing. And she kept the books anyway, because she believed accounts should be accurate, even when the numbers were uncomfortable. The county forced her to sell in 1944 when they widened the road and said the building was too close to the right-of-way. They paid her less than it was worth. She moved to Louisville and never came back. I found this building in 1985 when I was doing survey work in Breckinridge County. I recognized the family name on the old land records. I bought it in 1989 when the then owner retired, and I put it in a trust with both our names because I could not put it in just mine. It belonged to a Westfield, and you are the last Okafor, and I wanted this to be a joint thing while remaining yours specifically. I have been coming here to think. You know how I am. I need a place to sit and work out difficult things, and I have not always been good at bringing the difficult things home. This is my place for that. I'm giving it to you now because I've finished thinking, and what I thought is, deserve to have a place that was made by a woman who ran things alone and made it work, because that is what you have done for 53 years, and I have not always said so clearly. She set the letter down and looked at the ceiling. The timber and plank of the original icehouse ceiling, installed by someone in the late 1800s who had expected it to hold for one generation. It had held for 5. Finn got up, crossed the table, and lay down against her chair, his back against her leg. She picked up the letter. Josephine kept a record of everyone she fed during the Depression, names, amounts, whether they paid. I have a copy in the tin box. If you look at the names, you'll find the Dardens, the Millers, the Atchisons, and 24 others. People in this county may not know their grandparents were kept alive by a black woman from this ice house during the worst decade of the century. I thought it was worth knowing. The well. I had the concrete cap reset in 2017. The spring is still active. You can hear it if you put your hand on the cap on a quiet day. I didn't open it because that felt like something that should be done by choice rather than by me. It's your choice now. The lavender on the shelf, you mentioned once in 1994, that lavender in a jar looked like someone had bottled the summer. I put a jar here because I thought you should be able to find the summer whenever you needed it, even in a cold room. Clarence. Vera sat for a long time. She read the letter twice. She opened the tin box. Josephine's record book was inside, a small ledger in a clear hand, the names and dates running from 1932 to 1942, 40 families, the amounts given, the amounts repaid and not repaid, all recorded with the same precision that Susan Feld had described as Clarence's characteristic. It was Josephine's precision. It had come through the line. She held the ledger and thought about a woman running a dairy in an ice house during the Depression, in a county that would eventually force her out for a road-widening project, who had kept her accounts anyway. Because she believed accounts should be accurate, even when the numbers were uncomfortable. Clarence had said that about Josephine, and he had said it, she realized, about himself and perhaps about Vera. She had kept her accounts. 53 years of marriage to a man who thought in private and expressed himself in structures and arrangements. She had kept the account of that, the running total of what he was and what he gave. She had kept it accurately, and she had not complained about the numbers being sometimes uncomfortable. Finn pressed harder against her leg. She looked down at him. He looked up. He trained you for this, she said. He brought you here so you'd know this place, so you'd go to the shelf. Finn did not move. Good dog, she said. She went to the well in the late afternoon after the light had shifted to gold and the clearing was quiet. Finn walked beside her, not ahead, not behind, precisely beside his shoulder at her hand. She put her hand on the concrete cap. Clarence had said she could hear the spring. She pressed her palm flat and held it, and after a moment, there, a faint vibration, almost felt more than heard, the movement of water running deep in the limestone. She stood there for a while with her hand on the cap and Finn sitting at her side. She did not decide to open the well that afternoon. That was a project for another visit, with the right equipment and the county's approval. But she decided to find out what it would take. She thought Josephine would have approved of the process being done correctly. Susan Feld helped her file the necessary paperwork to formally take possession of the trust. The process was uncomplicated. Clarence had made it uncomplicated. The Breckinridge County Historical Society was, as she had expected, very interested in Josephine's ledger, and a woman there named Grace spent 2 hours with Vera on a Tuesday in April, turning the pages of the record book with careful hands. She fed 40 families, Grace said. 42, Vera said. There are 2 on the last page who are harder to read. She moved to Darden's Mill for the summers, driving down from Indiana in May and returning in October. She had the ice house fitted with electricity and a proper door, and she had a simple kitchen installed in the cottage that had stood behind it. She kept the limestone walls and the original shelving and the jar of lavender in the center of the middle shelf. Pamela came to visit in June. She stood in the ice house and looked at the walls and then at her mother and said, "When did Dad buy this?" 1989, Vera said. Pamela thought about this. "Before I was born," she said. Before a lot of things, Vera said. Pamela sat down in one of the chairs Vera had brought from Indiana. She looked at the jar of lavender. She did not ask about it, which Vera noted and appreciated. Finn lay in the doorway in the June heat and watched the clearing with the peaceful attention of a dog who has finished his work and is now simply present. The poem had said, Darden's Mill, and she had heard it 20 times and not listened, which was the kind of thing that happens over 53 years of a life shared with a man who spoke mostly in structures and arrangements and rarely in direct speech. She had learned to listen to what Clarence built rather than what he said. She had just not known until after how much he had built. Finn had gone to the shelf. He had pressed his nose into the corner and found the panel. He had been trained by Clarence to find what Clarence's hands had touched, and he had done it in the first 20 minutes. Straight to the shelf, straight to the hidden compartment, straight to the tin box with the ledger and the letter inside, not by magic, by memory, by the training of a man who understood that the dog would go where he had been, and that Vera needed someone to show her where that was. She had heard the poem 20 times on the 21st hearing. She listened. The things we are not ready to understand wait patiently in the words of poems and the corners of shelves and the cap of a sealed well that still holds the sound of running water. They wait until we are ready to hear them, and they do not complain about the wait.